Hello everyone, how you doing? And welcome back to Skye and Evan in the morning. And today, we're going to be talking about an M. Night Shyamalan movie, the first time we've done that here. And it is Unbreakable, a movie that you enjoy, right, Evan? That's why you recommended it.
Very much so. It's funny. I was just asking you like what you thought, and you were saying like you weren't quite blown away. I had a similar reaction to this movie when I first saw it, and this is one of those movies. Some of my favorite movies are the ones that are like infinitely rewatchable, and
Mm-hmm.
every time I rewatch this movie, I get something new out of it. There was so much that I appreciated that I didn't appreciate the first time. There were a couple of lines I'd forgotten about, and it's just this is a movie that rewards its viewer, and that's what I love so much about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly agree with that. It is genuinely like I know I said it didn't like didn't blow me away, but I genuinely did think it was a really good movie. It's it's a little interesting. I don't know. It kind of feels. I mean, it is dated, but in a good way. That's how that's how I feel about that movie. Like, and it's weird because it's a movie that came out in the year 2000, so it wasn't even filmed in the 2000s. But it feels so stereotypically 2000s, like the way it's shot with the fucking
Yeah,
cold
yeah.
color grading and the way everyone talks, like they're all whispering. That annoyed me so much of 2000s filmmaking. Um, but it kind of has a charm to it, and it's like it's like the kind of movie you'd see nowadays is like a deconstruction of superheroes before the superhero genre became like popular. It's so weird because like if that this movie came out nowadays, you think, yeah, it makes sense of like the postmodernism type of thing, but it's before that. It's before all of that. It's so it's
Well,
wild.
yeah, it was of the era where like things, because I think the first Spider-Man was the year 2000, but it's like you'd had the Batman movies from 1989, but those had like gone to Joel Schumacher levels by that time. Same with Superman. Like superhero movies hadn't really found their niche, and obviously they didn't until like kind of the MCU like popularized everything. But this was back in the era of like the movies not quite working out so well. They like the early 2000s are like the infamous ones, even though we're getting cameos of Deadpool and Wolverine with those characters. But but it's such a smart deconstruction because it's not really like a superhero. So getting into this is what I love about this movie. This entire movie is an origin story.
Yeah.
And what I've always laughed at with origin stories, people have like an aversion to origin stories. They don't like them. They're like, we're seeing Spider-Man's origin again. It's like Uncle Ben dies again. It's like my problem with it isn't that. My problem is that the first issue of Spider-Man is a full and complete story with a beginning, middle, and end. Peter learns a specific lesson, and that lesson is supposed to be what like defines his character in large part. And I don't think it makes a good first act of a movie. But everyone tries to just be like, "Hey, we'll just make that the first act and then we'll get going." I'm like, I it's so much better in like the Spider-Man video game where you're just like everything's already established and the first thing is him jumping out the window. Like you don't always need an origin story, but this is one of the few superhero like movies where they really do just spend the entire movie building up to the main character becoming a superhero.
Mhm.
And because it's about him rather than about him being a superhero. It's about him becoming one.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting because it's like, I've heard a lot of people say this is one of the best superhero movies, and it's so weird to call it that, like a superhero
Yeah.
movie, because it isn't that. And like the acts of heroism we see is him saving like two kids instead of like he stopped a train that was derailing or something that bombastic. Just like he saves two kids or victims of like a guy who broke in and killed their parents. It's like kind of small, um, which is kind of what I like. Like this movie is very self-contained, I guess. It's weird that it's self-contained and that they made two movies in that same universe, but like, I'm sure we'll get around to those two at some point.
Honestly, yeah, I feel like I can't help myself. Those I have so much to say about Glass. It is really frustrating to me.
Yeah, I've heard mixed things on Glass. I've heard Split is good though, but who knows?
Yeah, I like it in large part. Um I don't want to go into too excruciating a detail, but this is one of those movies that I feel like talking about it kind of in order is the best way to go. Because yeah, like I said, it's all following the main character, but the opening here, I've loved this. It's one shot. This is something that's like consistent in this movie, especially like you could just watch it and like pay attention to it. There's tons of unbroken takes
Yeah.
similar to like Spielberg's, like just non-show-offy oneers, and they use like mirrors a lot. They use like reflections of
Hmm.
characters and Mr. Glass that's supposed to be. But yeah, this opening scene, you got the mirror to like cut, like quote unquote cut between the characters, and the actor who plays the doctor in this scene, like really good performance of just being like not understanding what he's seeing, and just that line, it's like his arms and his legs are broken, so at birth Elijah, like his bones broke and he
Yeah.
was in pain.
I
And
I'm sure I recognize that Doctor Actor for from
uh
somewhere. I
I,
recognize his voice at the very least. I don't know from where.
he's the big thing it looks like he's in is Chicago Fire. Actually,
Mm,
he's like, apparently he's been on that forever, but I was looking him up because I'm like, dude, you, for what little screen time you have in this movie, you were
yeah.
great.
And
So
he has a very good voice as well.
yeah. So this introduction is amazing. Again, one take, the opening credits here until she gets up basically, and then you right before the train crashes. But so much is said in this opening scene. So you're just, David's just sitting on a train, and then a woman sits down next to him, and then you see he takes off his wedding ring
Hmm. Well, I kind of
consciously.
love because
And
they show him looking before the girl sits down. He looks forward and sees the little girl in the front seat, the seat in front of him, looking at him, and he just like gives her a little cute nod. And then for the rest of like the scene, we basically see her perspective of it because it's like it's filmed
yeah,
from the seats in front of them, just going back and forth between them as they talk instead of like cutting or anything. It's all one shot. It's brilliant. I really love that.
well, that's exactly what I was saying with the mirror, like the panning back and forth. And this is kind of the same thing. It's like a cut, but they don't cut. It's
Yeah.
just, it's so funny how that
I
works.
mean, genuinely, just like
Yeah,
outright, the cinematography in this movie is phenomenal. Like some of the best I've
yeah.
seen.
Such great. This is another thing that's amazing in this movie, the use of color. Like characters have like signature colors to them. Like obviously Elijah's is purple,
Hmm.
David's is like green, and there's, oh, it's so beautiful. And this was back in like the authentic days when there wasn't as much post-production, and just
Well, that's what I thought
something
was
about
so
this.
funny, right? Because when he senses the train is about to derail, I'm just like, oh, if this was nowadays, we'd see a whole CGI sequence of the train
Yeah,
and
they'd
explosions,
explode.
and then instead we just cut to his son watching on TV, and we just see the aftermath. Oh, the train derailed. Because yeah, that is more impactful. You don't need to show it, because especially because it'll break a little bit of the believability of this movie because it is so understated
Yeah,
that it is like kind of realistic in a sense.
well, that's what I love, is that like the doctor is like asking him, and like he can't, they're just like, we don't have an explanation. Like, were you just standing where you sit? Like, how are you not hurt? And like, we don't see. So we don't know. Like, was it just some miracle? And that, again, with the superpowers in this movie, like there's just enough there to like make it plausible that maybe he is just normal. But again, the point of the movie is that he believes it himself. So
Yeah.
in the dialogue here, two details that I love is like she's a sports agent, and she just asks like, do you like football? And he says not really. And then he also like asks like flirtatiously if like he's looking for synchronized swimmers, and then says, I'm afraid of water. Like the dialogue is purposeful. There's so much setup and payoff in this movie for things that happen later. And again, that's why rewatching this movie is just so cool, because it's, you realize how much is laid out and how much everything is supposed to hit.
Yeah, I hadn't even realized that. Like, yeah, I guess it didn't hit me because I just I just got to the
Well,
end of the movie. But yeah, the way you said it makes sense because it's a thing that becomes quite important about his character is him being afraid of water because it's like his weakness or whatever.
exactly. The doctor here. Did you recognize the funniest thing? I was like, do I know that guy? And I'm like, I do.
Oh yeah,
The
it's
doctor that's,
from fuck, what's the name of the House of Cards. He's
Yeah,
yeah, Kevin Spacey's
and
assistant.
Johnny,
Yeah.
yeah, and Johnny Vitti in The Penguin as well. I was like, dude, that's
Oh
him. It's
yeah.
just this one little scene. It's like it's so funny.
Yeah, I recognize him. His hair is a lot different. I guess he gave up on the hair that was very receding by that point.
More power to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I love this shot. There's a lot of like really unique. And again, I was mentioning the long takes, like feeling very comic booky. There's also just shots that feel like a comic book panel where they just rest on one shot and then you get like some form of action. This is exactly it. Like he's just sitting down and they're like just asking him for anything, like any allergies, any like history of like heart or kidney issues. Like he's like, no, nothing. And
And
then
in the
you just see
foreground
this
we
little
have
red,
yeah.
yeah, this little red dot just get bigger and bigger, and you're like, oh my God. It's like, and with the dialogue laying it out that like you didn't break one bone, you don't have a scratch on you, and all the victims looking at him as he's leaving, that was something that hit me that on this particular time. It's like, damn man, all these people that are in the hospital and that were at the church, like all those people on that train were real people, and
Yeah.
we see like the families and everyone that was involved.
Yeah, I mean that moment
Yeah.
hit me, especially it's really done really well as well because you have no dialogue there as well. You just see his son hugging him, and then the awkward little kiss from his wife, and then the kid tried to get him to hold hands, and then just their hands just slipping away. It's like there's so much detail that's like, man, you're saying so much without dialogue. I kind of love this.
Yeah. And then after that, you get like an introduction to them proper. And I love it. It's so great how this is almost unsaid until she like full out like asks him to start again. It's
Hmm.
because they're just kind of cold to each other. It's like they've been married too long. There's just the sparks kind of gone. Like whatever they had before, it's not quite there. And neither of them really seem happy. And it's handled really well and it's conveyed better. So yeah. So after this, you get the oh man, again, I don't want to go into too excruciating detail, like I said. Um, so like David gets a note on his car that just asks him, "How many days of your life have you been sick?" And then yeah, then he just straight up like asks the secretary or whatever that it's at the place he works, like the question. His boss thinks it's an in to try to like get a raise because he's been there 5 years and no sick days, which
I thought that
cool
was
little
a funny
moment. And
exchange because I was like, oh, like if you are the boss, yeah, that's what you're gonna think, right?
yeah, it's cool little detail. And then this great shot as well here with him standing with the poncho in the rain. Like oh, great example of like showing off with the cinematography. And again, like the whole football injury comes in later, and like he said, like I don't like football really, but he works at a stadium for football, and you just get this shot of him like looking at the players, and there's something in his face that's like kind of sad and regretful. So, and then you have him talking to Audrey, and they can't remember one time. And I will say, like some people, there's a lot of things some people call bullshit in this movie, and that's one of them is like the not being sick. I've honestly found it pretty reasonable. Like, I could see someone just not really getting a cold their life and not thinking too much of it, because some people are like, wouldn't you like think you're like super powerful? You never get I'm like, there are people that just don't get sick all that much and don't
Yeah.
really make much of a thing. So I'm like, I think it's all right.
Unless someone calls attention to it, which is what happens in this movie, I don't think like a normal person would like really notice it.
Yeah. So after this is when you get the introduction to Elijah proper, with the flashback to his childhood and his mom giving him comic books, and the kids call him Mr. Glass because he breaks like glass. And I love I love how they shoot just normal things and you just get an appreciation of how like dangerous the world itself is to Elijah, because
Hmm.
he just doesn't want to go on the playground. He doesn't want to hang out with the other kids because like it's dangerous to him.
Oh, and the shot
And
of him
he
opening the comic book, by the way, the presenter
oh,
is so fucking good. Just tracking as he turns it around. Oh, it's fucking cinema that is.
I'm not exactly sure what they did, if that thing was on a wire or something, but one way or another, that motion just it matches so perfectly. It is such a little innovative shot there. I love it. Um, so yeah, you get this funny little exchange with this guy who clearly is in the wrong store, and Samuel Jackson's doing his Samuel Jacksonisms, and then David and him meet. So you get him laying out that he thinks that it's such an interesting idea, because he basically the disease um the genetic disorder where his like bones are more brittle. I've heard like it's not like depicted necessarily realistically in this movie, like not the greatest surprise, but it is a real thing. Like
Oh
it
yeah, I've
is a
heard
real
of that. Yeah.
condition. Um, but yeah, he's like he thinks if like I'm on one end of the spectrum and I can't, and my bones break easily, is there someone that's like on the opposite end that can't be broken? So, and then David just thinks he's like a nut basically, or like a con man, and just takes off. And something that I really appreciated this time, and I've appreciated this a couple of other times, I love that Elijah tries to be as non-invasive as possible with him, because he bothers him, and he does like approach him a decent bit in this movie, but he tries his best just to like ask a couple of questions, get as much information as he needs, because he can't force him to be who he wants to be. He really does just try to encourage him. And a lot of characters act like that, kind of, prodding David and like pushing him to figure out like how he'll react. So,
I mean, yeah, it's why I think they actually get along when he goes to the stadium and sees him there instead of just like telling him to fuck off. Because it's just like
yeah.
generally just asking questions. He even makes a joke, so it's like,
Yeah, so that's the next little bit to go to. Something as well. I was mentioning the playground. I appreciate it. Like, dude, it low key is kind of dangerous for him to be in just a crowd like this. Like just at a baseball stadium, like all it takes is like being bumped in the arm or something like that. And he took a risk being here, but like you wanted to see him. So you yeah, like get dialogue laying out that he like chose to protect people, and then this moment where he bumps shoulders with a man, and he he decides to do pat downs, and he talks to Elijah. This is one of my favorite shots, like the just the entrance there. You like where you're panning backwards to like make the shot bigger. There's a lot of that, but he talks about being able to see to sense when people have done something wrong if he like touches them or is near them. And it's I love that line from Elijah when he's like it, like the superpowers instead of comic books are like an exaggeration of the truth. Like maybe it comes down to something as simple as instinct. And
yeah, I like that interpretation that the movie has of like superpowers. I thought that was cool. It seems like
because every
a really interesting direction to take. Like if you want to make like comic books such a huge part of the movie, which they are, to just be like this ancient knowledge passed down from like people who are superhuman. It is kind of neat to just think maybe it's just exaggeration, and it makes sense because like obviously comics, just like any story, just analogies or metaphors for stuff in real life. But taking that to the
oh
level
yeah.
of like, oh, he's just, someone super strength. Well, maybe he can lift 350 pounds. It makes sense. It's neat. I like the way this movie's kind of like understated, and these superpowers are just like making it seem like it's just like this above normal thing, rather than just like a huge like superpower like Hulk level. It's more
Yeah.
understated, and I
And
like that.
and just tangible enough, like you were saying, they're like being able to lift 350 pounds. It's like that's really impressive, but it's like I is that like superhuman? I'm like kind of ish. It's just enough. It's just enough to feel like plausible, and
Hmm.
like something that could actually happen in the real world. Oh, and then after that is when you get the stairs. This scene is fucking hard to watch, man. David described seeing a silver gun with a black grip, and Elijah tries to chase the guy down, and you just know it before it happens, but he's just limping along down the stairs, and then full tumble and just, but he sees it at the very end, confirms it that David was right, and it's just like it's like it's all worth it just for that. Man, the way they shoot this in the OST, it's just, oh, it's eerie to watch.
Yeah, I was very uncomfortable.
So yeah, let me so yeah, next big thing, like we were talking about the weightlifting. One of my favorite parts of this movie is Joseph, like, and his relationship with him. Like, it's funny, I actually didn't mention it earlier, but Audrey and him don't sleep in the same room, and it's like I'm not sure if what the implication there is that like Joseph wants to like sleep with in his dad's bed because like he's scared of like the train crash or whatever, or is like he just wants to be closer to him. But one way or another, like they're close in this movie, and they're like they just have such a wholesome relationship, and this, this is one of those examples where he just adds to the weight bench, and he's like, you should never do this day, like like it's very dangerous. It's like we've all had that with our dad, when your dad like lets you do something that like your mom probably doesn't like, but
Yeah.
oh, it's so cool just seeing him like just pushing his dad and trying to like get him to do something cool. And because David discourages himself in this movie, he doesn't believe in himself, and it's cool seeing people like Elijah and especially Joseph who just believe in him in spite of it all, even though he won't believe in himself. It's yeah.
Yeah, and the movie makes a little bit of a point about this, but it's a little scary. Like when Joseph like puts a gun on him. It's the kind of thing you're like, okay,
Yeah,
maybe you shouldn't think your dad's a superhero. Maybe chill out.
exactly. He does take it to the nth degree. So the school, this is a I've always found this an interesting moment, just this like NPC. We barely even see her face, but she remembers David, talks about like the how they keep like the story of the boy who spent 5 minutes at the bottom of the pool. Like, are you still phobic of water? And it's again like it's almost like he's forgotten why. He's like he's pushed that aside because I mean it's traumatic when
Yeah, I
something like
mean,
that
it is
happens
a
to you when
trauma
you're a kid.
response to like repressed memories like that. And he says, "I just didn't remember it. I remember it," which I thought was like, it does make sense.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that in this movie where you have to go with that idea that he's just kind of pushed things aside, and he just keeps disregarding all of the signs in this movie that like he might be what Elijah thinks he is. So yeah, and now we have the gun scene. This is again one take, like a ton of this movie, and this is one of those things that I could see just straight up not working in like in a modern movie. Like it would be so easy to flub the execution of this and make this come across as unintentionally funny, but this is like played 100% straight, and the dialogue is so good. And I love that line from Audrey, like sometimes when people like Elijah get hurt, like their mind can get hurt too, and it's like that cuts through so much of what Elijah is like.
I mean,
So
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we'll get to the ending, but yeah, it's definitely a truth for him.
Yeah, and this reaction of when he puts down the gun and David just unloads them, just all of them just collapse, just like god damn, man. And then this is the moment in the movie where he like actually like kind of draws a line in the sand, and he just says like please stay away from my family. And then and Elijah does, he because it's funny, he broods in the comic shop after that, and then he calls him, but he doesn't like David's the one who approaches him after that. Like he,
Yeah, I mean, he leaves a message on his phone. He doesn't force himself, I guess, on him.
yeah, and that's and that's that line. Oh man, I put that in my review of on Letterboxd. That little bit of sad. I didn't mention that in the first scene with them. that was one of the things that stood out with me with this movie on this rewatch was David describing waking up in the morning and feeling sadness. Like and that's what he brings back in this conversation. Like that little bit of sadness in the mornings you spoke of, like I think I know what that is. Perhaps you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's like it's this is why this movie's so cool. You can call it like a quote unquote superhero movie, but it's like it's the story of realizing who you are and realizing like realizing when you're unhappy with your life, realizing that when you're unhappy with what you're doing and trying to be something more that's like in line with who you are and what you value. So I love it. So after this, the comic shop again. So much of the cinematography of this movie is just so cool looking, and this shot is such a comic book shot of him in the wheelchair with his leg out, like all pinned up, and just all the action figures and comic books in the background, and he's just like I said, he's just brooding and upset. So. Uh, and now you have the dinner scene between them and the key piece of dialogue in here that's really cool. And again, what's so cool about these two, because like Joseph and Elijah are the ones who kind of like prod David to be a superhero, but Audrey's was the one who like David almost felt like he couldn't be a superhero for if he wanted to be with her. He because she doesn't like violence and didn't like football, or at least like the rewarding, being violent part of it. And David gave that up intentionally after the car wreck to be with her. And and she tells him in this scene that she wouldn't want that from him. She wouldn't want him to give it up. And the line as well with like when did you think we might not work out? And he said, I had a nightmare and I didn't wake you for you to tell me it was okay. And it's like, oh man, they connected later. It's great.
Yeah.
So this, and then yeah, that kind of leads into the ending. When he visits the train yard, because that's what Elijah says on the phone, that the weakness is water. Like every superhero has like one weakness, like so it's like your kryptonite. And again with the use of rain in this movie, I love that, like because they're obviously you get the pool later on in the third act, but it's raining a lot in this movie, and it's interesting for him to like his like costume as it were to be like a poncho that like keeps the rain off. So yeah, and then you see the car wreck, the music in this scene, and through this movie, by the way, James Newton Howard's like score is incredible. But you get like probably the most superhuman thing David does in this movie, where he like rips the door of the car off and pulls Audrey out,
Yeah. And I do
and
like the
then
moment where the guy asks, "Hey, are you okay? Like, are you
yeah,
hurt,
are
man?"
you
And he
hurt?
just looks.
Yeah, it's so cool. And then he calls him on the phone. He's like, I wasn't injured in that crash. I've never been injured. What do I do? And yeah, and that's it. Like you get maybe 10 minutes of him going out and being a superhero. Yeah, 16, and yeah, the whole third act where he's in costume is only about like 15 minutes. So he just goes to the train station and just gets different visions of different people, and then he finds the orange man and goes over and yeah, he's kidnapped kids. And something as well that I appreciated, so cool. So like you get him like freeing the kids, and then the guy pushes him into the pool. It was two kids who pushed him down in the pool and made him swallow the water the first time, and then I realized he's saved by two kids from the
Mm,
pool. They reach it out of like, oh,
that is cool.
even that connects.
Yeah.
So
I did think it was a
yeah,
little funny for him to be pushed off the window. I was like, okay, he's just gonna get back up, and it's like, yo, superhero moment. But then he's like, oh, it's a pool. It's like, of course it's a
Yeah,
pool.
it's an eerie shot too, where you just see like the covers just like moving over. It's like ah! And, like it's just swallows him up like a monster, like yelling. Oh, pool covers are dangerous, and some people don't realize. So yeah, and then he chokes the bastard out, and then yeah, just hangs up his cape and takes his girl to bed and says, "I had a bad dream." It's yeah. And then that's the last bit with Joseph where he slides the newspaper over. It's something I did not appreciate. He mouths the words, "You were right."
Yeah.
Like I'd only remembered him like just sliding the newspaper over and like it just being something in his eyes, but it's like, nah, you were right, man. You were right about me. It's like, ah, awesome. And then yeah, that leads into the end. So people have opinions about this ending, and we were talking about the whole twist cliche with Shyamalan. What did you think about the ending, and you know, kind of how the movie wraps up in total?
Oh, I liked it. I think it's actually really good. Because I was, because like for me, Elijah is a much more interesting character than David. Um, I was spent the time with like, I like him. He has this obsession with it, and I wonder why. And when you realize his motivation and what he actually did to achieve it, it's kind of like it's obviously a very dark, weird motivation, but it's like considering his obsession with comic books, I think it ties really well with that like idea that the movie's exploring with comic books and like his obsession with good and evil. Um, I thought that worked really well. Just him like trying to find the opposite version of him, someone who
Well,
was unbreakable. I thought that was really cool.
well, that's what I always love describing the ending of this movie as. It's basically like the revelation is like someone that you thought was almost like some form of a mentor to David turns
Mm-hmm.
out to be the supervillain, the arch nemesis, and it's like his quote unquote evil plan was to find a superhero, to make a superhero, because he spends this movie trying to make him realize who he is and to like have him go out there. And that's why he shakes his hand. He asks, that's the last thing he asks him, like, when you woke up this morning, did you feel it, the sadness? And when he says no, I think this is when we shake hands. And of course, and he knew what that meant too, because David had told him that he could sense when people had done something wrong. So he, in essence, this is him turning himself in, giving himself up, and yeah,
Basically, like I fulfilled my purpose. Now we're done.
yeah. That's the line. Now that we know who you are,
I
I
know who
know
I
who I
am.
am, dude. Samuel Jack.
He's
There's
so
probably a
good in
couple
this
of these
movie.
that you've got, but I'm telling you, there's you ever have like a line read in a movie and you're like, God damn, like with like one line, it's like that's like genuinely some of my favorite acting. His delivery of that line, "I'm not a mistake," is just like, oh man, it's like just at the edge of a voice crack, and he's just like, God, Elijah, you never were a mistake. It's like, man,
Yeah. I mean,
it's
Jesus, he's so like broken. Pun intended, I guess. Like mentally, like it because of his physical ailments. That is just like it is so. It is like kind of the textbook like comic book villain type of motivation. Like they're like kind of like
yeah.
broken and trying to find a reason for it for or try to fix themselves, and that's it just works really well for his character. It's why I really like it. Like this feels like this just like cl- classic comic book story, but in a way that it isn't really. I don't know. It's like it has all the traits of a superhero movie, but not quite the same as you'd expect from like a Marvel or a DC movie. It's special in a way. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, again, it's because it's kind of just the dynamic between these two characters. These two are what make the movie. And that's the line that he says, like, to not know your place in this world. That's just an awful feeling. And both David and Elijah, that's kind of what they're trying to figure out in this movie. They
Mm-hmm.
both don't know their place in this world. And it's when they find each other that they like figure that out. So I, the this is what is so funny about this movie is I think this is what started Shyamalan buying into the twist thing. Because let me read to you the fucking Rotten Tomatoes consensus. This has been unchanged forever. Uh, yeah. With a weaker ending, Unbreakable is not as good as The Sixth Sense. However, it is a quietly suspenseful film that intrigues and engages, taking the audience through unpredictable twists and turns along the way. It's like, fuck you, man. Like, what? The ending's bad. It's not as good as what are you talking about? It's like this is the thing though about like movies that have a twist. Some people get like caught up in the twist being the whole point. I'm like, yeah, it's one of the more memorable parts of that movie. And like you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, but the ending of that movie, it's similar to the like the newspaper scene in this movie. Like the ending of the movie is that kind of like that's David's ending, and the wrap up of Elijah's character is kind of like where the quote unquote twist happens. But I just find it so funny that people would like be that disappointed by either not getting a twist or getting a seemingly disappointing twist. Because I guess where that attitude comes from is it's predictable, right? And it's like, yeah, kind of, but I I always laugh at that too. I'm like, it's predictable, right? I'm like, it's predictable for a reason, though. It's because it's kind of set up, you know.
Yeah.
It's because it adds up, and it was like always there.
I
I
say
don't
that a
know.
lot about like twists, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's so predictable," but I'm like, that's sometimes that's a good thing, you know? Like,
Yeah,
I've heard people say that about the Batman twist as well. Like that also makes sense in that movie. That's why it's good.
yeah. Well, we'll get. Let me tell you something. You want an unpredictable twist? Glass has an unpredictable twist, and that's the fucking problem. It is like the most out of left field thing you could possibly imagine, and that movie has problems beyond the ending. Let me tell you, that is not just that the ending ruins everything, but I I think this is a great ending. This
Hmm.
is not something that I think is like even lackluster. I just genuinely think this is like where the movie's supposed to end. I remember the one thing that like kind of disappointed me when I watched this for the first time was the use of like the text at the end.
Hmm.
I remember being like, "Oh, like I'm just gonna lay it out," but really, what else do you show? Like
Well,
Elijah
yeah.
just getting in handcuffs or whatever. It's over. He's gonna
It's
go to
kind
the
of
police.
yeah, it is kind of weird. You obviously he is going to go to the police. I kind of think the scene could have just been better if they had just like just let it play out. David walks out and then that's it. Instead of like showing what
Yeah,
actually happened to like make it fully explicit, maybe. But it's not like
I
an
guess
issue either way.
maybe he was worried it would be ambiguous. Like it's like, did he let him go? And he's like, no, he did not let him go.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
uh, yeah, little bit weird that, but and I get being disappointed, but I just it's one of those things. I don't think it needs an insane twist, and I don't think it needs something like completely crazy and earth shattering. But because this movie isn't like that. This movie is just a quiet, subtle movie that's like primarily focused on two men and exploring an interesting theme about just overcoming sadness and overcoming like unfulfillment in your life. So
mhm, yeah. I
yeah.
I agree. I,
Yeah,
my issue with this movie is that I think it's a little self-indulgent in a way that kind of bother me sometimes. Like shots linger on for a little too long, and the use of slow mo sometimes. Okay, man, just kind of chill out.
I, I did find that funny just sometimes like the casual usage. There's like they kind of use that to depict his perception powers, but
Hmm.
yeah, I some of the like just slow-mo like wow, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so product of the early
Oh
2000s.
yeah,
Like
it
no one really
feels
does that
so early
anymore.
2000s, and it kind of reminded me the way it's so self-indulgent of Zack Snyder's Watchmen, which I don't think is a bad movie, but it had the same vibe of just like whoa, let's linger on this shot because it looks so cool when he's brooding with his poncho. Whoa. Like, okay.
Yeah, Zach goes far more insane with the
Well, yeah,
slow
Zack
mo, but
is known for
yeah,
his self-indulgence, but yeah. But
yeah.
like that was genuinely
Shane's got
like my main criticism of this movie. I don't think there's like anything I would pick apart in terms of like story level. It's just I really enjoyed it. It's just that it didn't like blow me away, but I genuinely did like it. Because sometimes you recommend a movie and I'll be like, it was good, but I didn't. But I actually did enjoy it. I had a fun time, and I honestly kind of feel like I want to rewatch it a few times. Like it seems like a fun movie
yeah.
to rewatch, and the details we were pointing out as we went through it, like just in general, like the stuff that you pick up on after knowing the full story. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I'm telling you, those honestly are like some of my favorite movies. I realized that a while back, like how much rewatchability and like with video games, like how much replayability matters to me. And this and Groundhog Day are like two of my favorite examples of that, of movies that are just like they when you rewatch them, there's so much to absorb, and it's a movie that rewards you for paying attention and for appreciating the small things. And I just think it gets better and better. But yeah, it's yep. I love this movie.
Hmm.
I really do.
Yeah, I noticed. I
It's
genuinely, I don't know. It's weird because like watching that movie didn't hit me like a kind of movie that you just like adore, but you seem to really, really like it. So, I mean, fair
I
enough.
yeah, it's in my top 20 all-time favorite films, and like I don't expect you to have the same reaction or like it. Uh Even with rewatching, but it's this one sticks with me. It really does.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. No, I genuinely did enjoy it too. Not a. Oh shit! I forgot that I needed to recommend something today. But yeah, while I figured that out, yeah, it is a good movie, and I mean, I got tired of being like, oh, Shyamalan, so cringe. His movies are so bad. I've been giving him more of a chance recently especially after I watched Trap, and that movie was just like genuinely so much fun. Where I'm like,
well, I want to watch some of his other movies. There's a couple like I haven't seen The Village. There's some like past this era that people say are all right, and I'm like
yeah.
I haven't seen Signs yet. So I'm curious.
Oh yeah, like genuinely, I think it is. He's a very interesting filmmaker, and kind of, even if he doesn't, you know, make hits a lot of the time, I still appreciate the like his creativity and just like the confidence he has in his own work. Because like he self funds most of his movies, right? So it's kind of
Yeah,
yeah,
and writes and directs and
yeah.
serves as a producer. Yeah, he
It's like he
and
genuinely
pretty
cares a lot about the movies he's making, and you can tell it is an M Night movie for better or for worse when you're watching it. So yeah.
yeah, it's commendable stuff, especially since he was pretty much doing that from like the beginning. He's always been at the center of his work, and say what you will about him as a filmmaker, but he's a purist. It goes back to like the Hitchcock era of like, just one guy kind of being in control of the film. Like he's basically an auteur. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
All right. Do you have a recommendation,
well,
Skye?
I the one I want to do is an M Night movie as well, but I think it'd be weird to do twice in a row. But I guess why not, right? Um,
Yeah.
I I would have recommend Knock at the Cabin.
Oh. God damn it.
I have
You're
not
gonna
seen
do
that.
that to me?
I am. I have not seen that movie. There's a YouTuber I edit for that said it was good, and I've heard it's not terrible. I've heard it's interesting, but I've heard so few things about it, like so little discourse around it. But after watching Trap, I was like, hey, I may as well watch some of his other stuff. And Knock at the Cabin is one that I haven't seen, a lot of stuff said about it. So Knock at the Cabin.
It's true. People were more talking about Trap for sure.
Yeah.
I that kind of no. I think Knock at the Cabin seemed to confuse more people than anything, but yeah, that trailer did not sell me. So All right.
I like the actors, and it could be
Yeah,
interesting. Like maybe.
it could. If anything, it looks pretty small scale. It looks
Yeah.
like it's stuck at the cabin. Like the world ending or not ending is like almost beyond that. So, yeah. I will give it a fair shot. You deserve it, Shyamalan. Seriously,
Yeah.
On and off. I got problems with you as a filmmaker, but man, sometimes you do deliver.
Yeah. So after watching Unbreakable, we're all gonna watch Knock at the Cabin. This is our Shyamalan arc, I guess. All right.
Why not?
All right. Well, with that, folks, I guess we'll see you next week for Knock at the Cabin. And thank you very much for watching. And we both do very highly recommend Unbreakable. Very good movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Catch you later.
Bye bye.